السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. So before we get started with today's etiquettes, I want to just get a refresher of what we spoke about yesterday. Can someone start reminding all of us? Dr. Haifa wasn't here yesterday. Why don't you show her that you're such a good student? So I'll ask a few hands, you just tell me what we spoke about and we'll go on to today's session. Yes, and not only what we spoke about, but if you have your own, small reflection over it, I don't mind you sharing it. But if it's a long lecture, then just come to the stage. Go ahead. Say it again. So, tasihun niyya, but let's talk before that. Like, what did we say before that? Yes, the importance of adab. Okay, perfect. What about it? So, no, what about the importance of adab? Why is adab so important? Yes, sister. We spoke about the etiquettes before seeking knowledge. Perfect. How many etiquettes were there before speaking knowledge? 4. Okay. Number 1, which one is it? You guys can say it loud. Which one was it? Intention. Tasihun niyya. I want to just add one thing, that we mentioned 5 intentions to seek knowledge, right? There are certain people that came here and people question sometimes the Miftaah audience, because Miftaah audience, or Al-Maghrib audience, or the Qalam audience, we have part-time courses, the Jannah audience. They're like, they're not true seekers of knowledge. They make these blanket statements, but they're just there for the vibe. Okay, I'm sure some of you are here for the vibe, all right? But actually, that's not a bad thing either. What's wrong with being there for the vibe? People go to amusement parks for the vibes. People go to different places for the vibe. People go to Qahwa house for the vibe. You can make it better. You can make better adni chai at home, right? So if you're coming for the environment, that's also good intention. It's no problem. All right, so that's intention. Someone also came to me after class and said that, how do we correct our intention? The best thing about intention for knowledge is that knowledge is so pure. It's so pure that the more you seek it, the more your intention gets corrected. Fudayl ibn Iyad said that initially some of us started seeking knowledge for other things, and knowledge refused and denied our entrance, except for the fact that we learned it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, you initially may not have the right journey there, but as long as you keep learning, you will end up being right on the right track and having tasihun niyya. All right, that's the first one. Second one, al-jid, hard work. Working hard, staying in class. Whatever, we spoke about struggle in comparison to other people, but we also have our own struggles. What was the third one? Muwadhaba. All right, so how many of us acted upon muwadhaba today? Raise your hands. MashaAllah, muwadhaba was to come on time, before the teacher. Don't wait, don't make the teacher wait for you. You should wait for the teacher. Also during breaks, you should come first. Then the teacher should be there. So we acted upon that today, inshallah. And what was the fourth one? Hurma. What was something we mentioned about hurma? One person. What was something you mentioned about hurma? Yeah, go ahead, sister. Say it again. Yeah, honor and respect is better than obedience. Yes, absolutely. What else? What else did we mention? Yes, Habibi. Yeah, the one who raised your hand. Go ahead. That's coming from a person who doesn't have a turban. MashaAllah, may Allah bless you. Yeah. Say it again. Come in a state of wudu. Come in a state of wudu. Come with nice clothes. Have respect and honor for class like this. Okay. So today's session is going to be about 4. So I mentioned 4 yesterday. 4 etiquettes of knowledge that we must have during our study of knowledge, during our classroom sessions. Before, today's 4 during, and inshallah, if Mufti Abdul Rahman allows me to speak again, we'll have one on Monday that are 4 afterwards. So it makes it easy to understand all of them. The first one, okay, before I start, I'm going to give you guys a minute. Think about which 4 I'm going to talk about. Bismillah. And again, don't talk. Just think about it. The only thing we should hear is your pen moving. Think about which 4 things I have summarized and shortlisted among hundreds of etiquettes. But these 4, in my opinion, are the most important ones in today's age, speaking to this audience. Think about it. Don't say anything yet. I'll give you guys a few seconds. All right. Who wants to start sharing? Go ahead, sister in the back. And you know what? Next time we do this, when we do this next time, there's already sisters that have their hand up before they even think. They're writing like this. They're writing. Okay, go ahead, sister. Okay, one of them, you're saying minimize distractions. Anybody else? Go ahead, sister. Active listening, listening to understand. Yes, sister.
Taking notes.
Taking notes. Okay, brother in the back. Ask good questions. That's 4. Yes. Sitting upright. That's 5 different ones. Yes, sister. Hey, it's not even fair that you're a Miftaah student, but still, that's not interrupting. That's 5. Yes. Sincerity during speaking knowledge. We already spoke about sincerity. It's done. Let's go. No, that's okay. Ihtiram. Yes, brother from Switzerland, right? Patience. All right. MashaAllah, some of you got the right answer, and some of you didn't. But let's start. My 4. Number 1, I believe this is the most important quality to have in order for you to benefit from your surroundings. Let me take it a step forward. The most sacred places on this earth, Mecca, Medina, Bayt al-Maqdis, beautiful places where you should walk into, or even before walking into, think about even going, and that can change your life. But if you don't have this quality, you're not going to be able to benefit from your surroundings. This is like a must-have. And it is called istihdar. It's many different words I wrote down, but I'm going to give you guys one word. Istihdar. It means being mindful, being present, making yourself present. So think about it. When you go to Masjid Nabawi, Madinah Munawwara, there's no longer the homes of the Sahaba there. There's no longer anything there that actually is the same as it was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Sa'id bin Musayyib rahmatullah says, the most I've seen the tabi'een crying in my life was not at any Quranic ayah that listened to, or not anyone's death. You know when it was? He said the most I seen someone crying in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ was when the homes of the Prophet ﷺ were destroyed. So they could be added into that space, can be added to the masjid. Why were they crying so much? Because that reminded them of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, what's going to happen to the next generation? They would come to Medina and not see the house of the Prophet ﷺ, not see how he lived. How are they going to love the Prophet ﷺ? How are they going to appreciate the Prophet ﷺ? So when we go to Medina Munawwara, we don't see those things. We see tiles, we see a beautiful dome, we see beautiful architecture. But if we get caught in that, and we don't have istihdar. Istihdar means I may be walking on the same place where the Prophet was walking. And so you're taking yourself out of just that environment you're in, but you're saying, you know what, this was the same place where Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu anhu's house was. And then thinking about that. One time, Umar ibn al-Khattab anhu, he was sitting in front of the member of the Prophet ﷺ, and he started crying so much. And someone asked him, why are you crying? He says, because I remembered a moment when the Prophet ﷺ was sitting right in front of me over here. I remember a moment when he was sitting right in front of me. So this is istihdar, to make yourself present. So this is important for class. And I'll go over a few things. Abu Darda used to say in his dua, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min tafriqatil qalb. Oh Allah, I seek refuge from you in the tafriqa of the qalb. You know what tafriqa means? To divide something, to break something into pieces. That my heart is distracted. And someone asked him, what does that even mean? He says, أَن يُوضَعَ لِي فِي كُلِّ وَادٍ مَالٍ. That I have so many things I have to think about. This business, that thing, this thing. I seek refuge in that. And then one other Abu Darda used to say, إِسْتَعِيذُوا بِاللَّهِ مِنْ خُشُوعِ النِّفَاقِ. Seek refuge in Allah from pure hypocrisy. The purest form of hypocrisy. And he was asked, what is this hypocrisy you're speaking of? And he says, أَن يُرَى الْجَسَدَ خَاشِعًا وَالْقَلْبُ لَيْسَ بِخَاشِعٍ. That you see that your body is present somewhere, but your heart is absent. Your body is there. You know, I always mention the poem of Iqbal, ये सजदा तुझे काफिर ना कर दे इकबाल, तू झुकता कहीं और है और सोचता कहीं और है. That, oh Iqbal, this sajda that you're doing, may it not take you further from Allah. You're bowing down physically in front of Him, but your heart is somewhere else. Right? And so, Abdullah bin Mas'ud used to say, مَفَاوِزُ الدُّنْيَا تُقْطَعْ بِالْأَقْدَامِ. The journeys of this world are traversed through walking, driving, flying, you know, with the turbulence, right? This is how you want, from here to there, how do I go? I have to get there by walking, moving. But he said something so interesting. He said, وَمَفَاوِزُ الْآخِرَةِ تُقْطَعْ بِالْقُلُوبِ. But the levels, the journey, the stages of akhirah, you travel through them and elevate with your heart. You can sit right here and not move. Just your heart can take you straight to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With no movement at all. Just the fact that you're present. And then Yahya bin Mu'adh, rahmatullah alayhi, used to say, Man ashkhasa biqalbihi ila Allah. The one who sits in a place and their heart is completely empty. First, you have to empty your heart so that you can benefit from the knowledge. And how Dr. Haifa was mentioning about getting affected by the verses of the Quran. Man ashkhasa biqalbihi ila Allah. إن فتحت ينابيع الحكمة من قلبه وجرت عليه لسانه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up the rivers of hikmah in their heart, and this person can speak with it now. Right? And I'm going to say one last thing about this. Ulama say that seeking ilm, is the salah of the inner self. Ilm. أن العلم صلاة الباطن. So think of salah. For salah, you have to purify yourself before you can stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to remove all these other obstacles and then focus on this salah. Got to get out of your car, got to stand in front of Allah, purify yourself. Same thing with ilm. You have to purify your heart, clean your heart before you can attain knowledge. The second thing he says, like in salah, this is in Madarij al-Salikin, Ibn Qayyim Ahmad is mentioning this. Like in salah, you have to face the qibla. You have to face the qibla. And because ilm is the ibadah of the qalb, you have to now turn your heart towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, subhanAllah, something so beautiful. He says, he's talking about these human beings now. He says, بَلْ وَجَّهَ بَدْنُهُ إِلَى الْبَيْتِ وَوَجَّهَ قَلْبُهُ إِلَى غَيْرِ رَبِّ الْبَيْتِ. So poetic. He says, you know, you turn your heart to this house of Allah, the Kaaba, but you turn your body towards the Kaaba, but you don't turn your heart to the one who created the Kaaba, the Lord of the Kaaba. So how is that relevant for us, and how does it look practical for us? For us, you know, in the story of Maryam alayhi salam, Allah says, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَرْيَمْ إِذِ انْتَبَذَتْ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا مَكَانًا شَرْقِيًّا. She left her family. One way of keeping your heart empty and having istihdar, the first way and the most effective way is removing obstacles. Someone mentioned that, right? Removing obstacles. Look at Maryam alayhi salam. She wanted to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She left her family. Many of you have left your families and have come here. Correct? So that's a beautiful thing. But shaitan is not going to stop there. In the Quran, Allah mentions about shaitan's trick and the way he comes to the children of Adam. He says, لَأَحْتَنِكَنَّ ذُرِّيَّتَهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. لَأَحْتَنِكَنَّ. You know what أَحْتَنِكَنَّ means? I'm sure, man, I wish you guys studied Arabic with us. أَحْتَنِكَنَّ comes from the word tahniq. You've heard the word tahniq before? What is tahniq? Yeah, you take a date and you take it to a sheikh and then, or someone in your family that you love, and they put the date in their mouth. And the sunnah of it is just to put it in your, like right in your mouth and then chew it with your teeth. That's it. And the date should touch the top of your mouth right here, inside. That's it. So hanak means the top of your mouth, the place where you can't see. I remember Sheikh Abdullah, he took a date to a sheikh for tahniq. This sheikh used to eat pan. You know pan? His mouth was like full of this red. He's like, so Sheikh Abdullah is like, my older brother, he took it, he's like, Sheikh, I need you to do tahniq for my son. So he's saying that, chewing this pan. And then he spits out in this little, vessel. If you haven't seen pan in your life, good. Otherwise, you'll be traumatized. Trust me, it's the worst thing. Anyways, after that, Sheikh Abdullah gives him this date. He's like, man, I don't want my son to be so blessed, but it's all good. Let me just give it a shot. And this sheikh was a pretty big sheikh. Like, you can tell he used to eat a lot too. So the sheikh, my brother gives the date to the sheikh. The sheikh takes the date, rahmatullah alayh. He takes the date, he puts it in his mouth, and he starts eating it. And remember, he just ate the pan. And then he's like, he just starts chewing it. And then at the end, he's like, you have some Ziploc bag or something? And my brother had a bag, he takes it and he just spits in it. And my brother's like, there's no way my son's eating that. There's no way. So then he takes it to another sheikh, and the other sheikh puts in his mouth the right way of doing it, tahniq. And mashallah, may Allah bless this man. But the reason why I'm saying that is because shaitan, Allah talks about shaitan's tricks, and he says, لَأَحْتَنِكَنَّ, meaning he comes from a place where you can't even see, you can't imagine, you don't even notice it. So how is he going to come? You came to this place, one of the distractions you already left. Leaving home, you came here, some of you coming from your homes in Michigan. Now shaitan's going to say, okay, he works hard so you don't do ibadah. But then once you beat him and you're like, I'm going to do this ibadah, he says, well, I'm going to come during your ibadah and mess it up. Okay? You came all the way here to learn knowledge. Let me figure out a way so that these people don't actually benefit from being in this gathering, from staying here for 3-4 days. SubhanAllah, we have people from all over the place. So you have to stay on guard. Because shaitan doesn't want you or me to benefit from these gatherings. Remember, these gatherings, these are beautiful gatherings, right? Umar ibn Khattab used to say that these gatherings, the ones we're sitting in right now, speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the cure for the heart. And speaking about people is the source of diseases. So this is a beautiful gathering. So how do we benefit from it? Remove our distractions. You see, Maryam alayhi salam left her family like all of you, leaving. And then she did one more thing. فَاتَّخَذَتْ مِن دُونِهِمْ حِجَابًا. Have you ever seen i'tikaf? People come to the masjid. They come to the masjid, they already left their family. But then they do one more thing. They put this little, like barriers and curtains, another secondary hijab. Why? Because so they can focus a little bit more. So all of us, now we have to put that secondary hijab, secondary barrier. Now, I'm not going to tell you exactly what you should do. Everyone can have different strategies. I would say one of them is pray 2 rak'ahs before coming to class. Just get yourself ready. Pray 2 rak'ahs, Pray 2 rak'ahs before sitting down. Another one could be, what do you think another one could be? What is that? Wudu, yes. What else? How about your phone? Right? Removing, if you want to get, if your obstacles, if we do not remove these obstacles between us and Allah, then these will become an obstacle in our journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to remove these barriers. So now our phones. Sitting in class, we're paying attention, then all of a sudden we get a notification. Doesn't that distract you? We're only here for 3-4 days, so it's probably a better idea to turn them off. Or just go see them when you go outside in the hall. That would be a better idea. You know, some people, they're on their laptops taking notes, and when Dr. Harry was speaking, and then when you see someone like zoomed in on the laptop screen and they're like so focused and they're typing, that means they're not listening. They're doing something else, right? Like, like what are you listening to that you're so if your laptop or your phone or your iPad can distract you, put it on. There's some people taking notes on phones and iPads. Good. I take notes on iPad, but do not disturb. No other notifications, no other apps. This will help you make your heart attentive. Once that happens, there's a second quality now, second etiquette. Before I go to the second etiquette, whatever I just spoke about, speak about for a minute. Bismillah. Everyone. Bismillah. Remind each other about a few anecdotes and statements. Bismillah. The brothers are not talking to each other. They're looking at me. All right, Assalamu alaikum. I make you do this in class just because this is something that you should do after class finishes as well. The best way to retain knowledge is a mudhakara of knowledge. Discuss it. When I say discuss it, don't give your own speech, right? Whatever you heard, discuss it. We have this whole idea of reflections, you know, and this is my reflection. Just discuss it. It helps you retain. We're going to be hearing so many things the next 3-4 days. This is a very practical way of keeping things and preserving things. The more you say it, the more you preserve it. All right. Once that is clear, your heart is empty, the vessel is empty, now you can, Dr. Haifa was speaking about effect of listening to the Quran and all that, and luckily I came 20 minutes before my class started. I had a lot of those things to talk about today, and you're going to hear it from her. So I'm going to speak about a different concept of this. The second important quality of sitting in class is adabu sima', the etiquettes of listening. All right, once your heart is empty, now you can actually taste the sweetness of what you're hearing. Now you can taste it. Hassan al-Basri used to say, rahmatullahi alayhi, تَفَقَّدُ الْحَلَاوَةَ فِي ثَلَاثٍ. You should search for the sweetness of iman, sweetness of life, enjoyment of life in 3 things. في الصلاة, in salah, وفي القرآن, when reciting Quran and listening to Quran, وَفِي الذِّكْرِ وَمَجَالِسِ الذِّكْرِ, and during remembering your remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or sitting in the gatherings of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So once your heart is empty, then you can feel the sweetness and the joy of something. Once you feel the joy of something, now the length of it doesn't bother you. Once, this is a very bad example, but I'll give it. Watching something you like or enjoy, 3 hours goes by, 4 hours goes by, you don't even realize. But then, like starting something you don't enjoy and watching it, like a person who, I watch sports. So I'll watch like hockey or basketball. If there's Canadians here, so if there's some Americans who don't know anything about hockey, they're sitting there watching with me, those 2-3 hours become dreadful. Versus a person who actually watches it and they're the fan, those 2-3 hours go by so fast, you don't even realize the game is over. Same thing with this. We're sitting for 7-8 hours. When your heart's empty and then you start feeling the enjoyment of it, you don't even realize. 4 or 5 hours went by, like, wow, that finished so fast. So then what is the second quality is the etiquette of listening. We're going to enjoy it. Imam Ghazali rahmatullahi says, لا ينال العلم إلا بالتواضع وإلقاء السمع. You can never attain knowledge if you don't have two things. One is humility, and second is attentive listening. Attentive, إلقاء السمع. That you give your full body, your soul, your mind, and you hear everything that's being mentioned. Dr. Haifa mentioned all about the Sahaba, how they engage with the Quran. And I'll just mention one anecdote. Ibrahim Taymi rahmatullah, he says, I met 60 Sahaba, 60. And every single one of them, any time they heard إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا, they all cried. Every time they heard it, they cried. How many times do we hear it? And nothing happens to us. They heard إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ, they start crying. Because it took effect, because their hearts were so pure and they're so clean and they're so attentive. Hassan bin Abdul Aziz rahmatullah, he says, مَنْ لَمْ يَرْضَعُهُ الْقُرْآنِ وَالْمَوْتِ ثُمَّ تَنَاحَطِ الْجِبَالُ بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. He says, a person who does not tremble and pause when they hear the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they see death, they don't change. He said, even if the mountains fall in front of them, they're not going to change. Nothing can change them. So now how does that look for us? Let me tell you a practical, because all these etiquettes are practical. The number one thing, listen to this. ينبغي لطالب العلم أن يستمع العلم والحكمة بالتعظيم والحرمة وإن سمع مسألة واحدة أو حكمة واحدة ألف مرة. Ibn Jama'ah rahmatullah, he says that a person must listen to every word and every hadith and every verse that is being recited, that's being spoken about, with respect, with honor, even if they heard the same hadith, the same story 1,000 times. He says, now he goes on to say, how do you measure that? He says, مَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ تَعْظِيمُهُ بَعْدَ أَلْفِ مَرَّةٍ كَتَعْظِيمِهِ في أول مرة فليس بأهل العلم. He says, a person whose zeal and eagerness and joy when hearing about this verse or story of Sahabi is not after that he heard it for the 1,000th time. If he does not have the same joy and sweetness as he did when he heard it for the first time, this person is not worthy of learning knowledge. Brothers and sisters, this is a pandemic in our community. Whenever a khatib comes and he starts speaking, and you already heard the story before, we tune out right there. It doesn't matter how many times your kids tell you, I love you. It sounds good every single time. Doesn't it? Hopefully. It doesn't matter how many times your wife or your husband tells you, I love you. It sounds good every single time. It didn't matter how many times the Prophet ﷺ said the same thing over and over again. Imagine Abu Bakr anhu going with the Prophet ﷺ in Mina, in the Mawasim al-Hajj, and they're traveling. And every single person, wallahi, this is so hard. Because as speakers, when we travel with people, we say the same speech, like we had the speech like yesterday, and now next day we're speaking and they're there again. You're like, yo, can you just leave the hall? You feel a little uncomfortable. Then next day you're speaking somewhere else and they're there again. You feel a little uncomfortable. It's also the speaker and also the listeners. Like, oh, we already heard this yesterday, right? But imagine Abu Bakr anhu. He's with the Prophet ﷺ every single day. And he's going everywhere and he's saying to people, قُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ تُفْلِحُونَ. Say La ilaha illallah, you'll be successful. Nothing changes in his words. But he was not looking at the words. He was looking at the one that was speaking. He was looking at the Prophet. He loved him. So anything he said, even if he was quiet, that was so much for him. So Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayhi, he was asked by Imam Malik when he was testing him whether he is worthy of seeking knowledge with him. He says, كيف شهوتك للعلم? What is your enjoyment and crave for knowledge? And you know what he said? He says, Wallahi, when I hear something even if I heard it 1,000 times, my ears enjoy so much that my entire body envies my ears and wishes it was my ears so they can enjoy like that as well. Imam Malik says, all right, you're accepted. How do we feel? How do we feel? You know, we're going to hear sometimes repetitions, hear the same thing. But how do we feel? If it's something that Allah and the Prophet are saying, it's okay. We heard it. Musa, some stories mentioned over and over again in the Quran. It's okay. No problem. So, and I'll say one more thing. Ata ibn Abi Rabah, how should you react? When you're speaking, when I'm speaking and you heard something before, I could literally tell if you heard it before. Just by your facial expressions, right? That's how, all right, this guy knows this one. When I start a poem and someone already knows it, they put their head down, right? And so Ata ibn Abi Rabah, he says, subhanAllah, listen to this. He says, Inna shab la yatahaddathu bi hadith. Like this young man, this, the energetic young scholar, like Mullah Hanzala, he's speaking about something. فَأَسْتَمِعْ, I listen to him so attentively, as if I've never heard this, كَأَنِّي لَمْ أَسْمَعْهُ, as if I've never heard this in my life before. And then he drops a mic. He says, وَلَقَدْ حَفِظْتُهُ قَبْلَ أَنْ يُولَدْ. And he said, the reality is I memorized that before he was even born. But the way he listens, as if from a youngster, I listen to him, he's a scholar. But no, إِنِّي لَأَسْمَعُ الْحَدِيثِ مِنَ الرَّجُلِ وَأَنَا أَعْلَمُ بِهِ مِنْهُ فَأُرِيهِ مِنْ نَفْسِي أَنِّي لَا أُحْسِنْ مِنْهُ شَيْئًا. He says, I listen to a hadith or some words or a story from somebody and I express to him a mannerism that he thinks I've never heard this before. So he enjoys telling the story. That's adab al-sima'. That's how we should sit in class and listen. We should first, once we empty our hearts, we can enjoy the words. We can sit down in class. It won't be a burden. And one of the main etiquettes is listen to things, even if you heard it so many times before, don't listen to it as if you heard it before. Pay attention and listen. Now, how many etiquettes was that? 2. The third one. This one is important. Remember I said we can't tell which one is more important than the other? This one is ihtiram for the teacher in the class. Not ihtiram for teacher outside the class. That's a different whole subject. Ihtiram, what level of respect for the teacher in the classroom? First of all, you brothers and sisters that are sitting here are so fortunate that you're sitting in a classroom and you have so many scholars teaching you. For this you should all say Alhamdulillah. Because the problem of this ummah today is so much of knowledge is being attained just through books and just through online resources. Okay? In Imam Shafi'i, he says, مَنْ تَفَقَّهَ مِنْ بُطُونِ الْكُتُبِ ضَيَّعَ الْأَحْكَامِ. A person who just learns from books. So imagine what he would say if he saw YouTube or he saw Google. I'm not saying don't subscribe to the Miftaah YouTube channel. Do that, all right? All of them. But you cannot expect to become a scholar, right? Or a true student of knowledge. It's good for motivation. It's good for encouragement. It's good for reminders. He's not talking about YouTube and Google. He's talking about a person who has a book in front of him and knows how to read it and understands Arabic. He's a person who does this, he will waste, he will destroy the ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they won't understand it. He says, Min a'zam al-baliyya, the worst tragedy of our time is tamshikh al-sahifa. Tamshikh al-sahifa. You know what sheikh means? He's saying the tragedy of our time is to make the book your sheikh. I would say tamshikh al-internet, like making the internet your sheikh. So the fact is that we're so blessed that we have teachers teaching us. So we should honor them and respect them. How do we honor them? Oof. Students in Miftaah class know I do this like every single day when I teach. I always say, please forgive me if I say something that will offend you. So you'll forgive me? Okay. The first way, when you sit in class, what is a way of honoring them? Of course, we already talked about adab al-sima'. I'm talking about practically as a student sitting in class now. Whew. Imam Shafi'i says, كنت أصفح الورقة بين يدي مالك صفحا رقيقة هيبة له لئلا يسمع وقعها. He says, I used to turn the pages in my book in front of Imam Malik in such a gentle manner just because I did not want him to even hear the moving of my pages. And he was a scholar himself. He was a scholar himself. Let me say one more thing. His student, Imam Shafi'i's student, wallahi, I enjoy teaching this class because I enjoy studying their lives. These people were just unbelievable people. And I, like many other scholars, we always pin it down to the fact that they were so particular about the smallest things. Because of that, Allah made them great. The smallest things, they were so particular about it. No, this is how it has to be. I want to learn this too. So particular. So he says, his student Rabi', he says, Wallahi majtara'tu an ashrab al-ma' wa-shafi'i yanzuru ilayya. Out of respect for Imam Shafi'i, he says, Wallahi, I would not have the courage to even drink water in class in front of Imam Shafi'i out of respect for him. Now, I'm not saying you should not have water bottles. I'm not, huh? We shouldn't have it? Okay, Dr. Haifa said we shouldn't have it. Okay, that's not me, she's saying that, okay. So, I remember as a student in like 97, 98, sheesh, now they know my age. I'm 23, by the way. So don't make sense. My son's 11 years old, so doesn't make sense. So I used to say as a child, when I was a kid, when I was like 7, 8, 9 years old, I loved Jordan so much. When people used to ask me my age, I used to say 23. My dad used to say, don't say 23. At 10, I was 20. I'm already 23. So then I became 23, I'm 23. Then I became older than 23, I'm still 23. So if I could say as a kid, I can say as an adult. Look, when we were young, we would walk into a hifz class or alim program for like 6, 7 hours. No student had water or nothing. Like it was something that we never even thought of. Now forget like Miftaah students or the you students coming for just 3, 4 days. I'm talking about the full-timers that study ilm for 10 years. They're all walking with those gym bottles, walking like this all loud and sitting in front of the teacher, gulping water, and the teacher's teaching. And like, when you read this, you realize that that's so far from adab.
One sec.
Sorry about that. Why are you speaking to me like that? All right, so that's so far. See, even Siri got offended. All right, so that's so far from adab. So I would say you can bring water, no problem. But just make less sound. Less sound. Because if you think you know your body better, if you think you can sit 3, 4 hours without drinking water and you'll be fresh, no problem. But if you don't bring the water in class. But if you're someone who drinks every few minutes to stay fresh, bring it to class because it disturbs the teacher. It really does. You know what's even more disturbing? Look, when you walk into any Miftaah program, Miftaah, mashallah, is known for having snacks and food and ikram. You walk by this table of chips and cookies and biscuits. Habibi, I'm talking to these guys. Habibi. All right. That stand of chips is not yelling your name. Please take me. Right now. I need you in my life. Okay? It's not saying anything to you. What happens is before we even sit, we're grabbing chips. Like my son Mu'adh yesterday, he got mad that I said he sucked. And he had like one bag of chip here, one here, he's eating here. I said, go outside and finish your food. What happens in our programs is that we're sitting, like that. That is disturbing for the teacher. Again, in a light way, I'm saying, don't do it. Don't do it. It is not, look, even as children in front of your parents, you shouldn't do it. Imam Zain al-Abidin, rahmatullahi alayhi, he used to be careful in front of his mother. People used to say, you're not a good child. You don't eat with your mother. He says, no, I'm afraid to eat with her for 2 reasons. Number one, he said that I'm afraid that as I'm eating with her, her eyes go on a morsel or a portion of meat, that she wants to eat and I take it before her, and I become someone who's disobedient to her. And I don't know what she wants. Versus us, our mother cooks food and puts in the fridge. Maybe it's for her, and we come at home 1 o'clock in the morning, take it and eat it. I remember one sister and our auntie in our community, Ypsilanti, she was a widow. She called me once and she told me, Berta, can you do me a favor? Just talk to my son about one thing. He always comes home late, 1, 2 o'clock. I have diabetes and I have this. I prepare food for me to eat early in the morning. He comes at night and he finishes it. Just tell him to just not eat that, because that's the food I eat. And look at Zayn al-Abidin. Look at the difference. Number one, he says that's one thing. And second thing is, I don't want to disturb her with my food. As I'm eating it, she gets disturbed. So this is etiquettes of being around people. Even when your father or mother, don't just drink and eat and chill. This is your father, your mother are also people who deserve your honor and respect. This is also adab for them. So I'm going to end off that. So that's the 3 things that we did so far, because we have 2 minutes left. Adab of sima, right? How should we behave or react when we heard something, heard it 500 times? How should we react to that? As if it's your first time hearing it. Last one. The last one, someone already mentioned it. So I'm going to just go over it quickly because we only have 2 minutes left. Is as you're sitting in class, right? If you're paying attention, you're enjoying it. You have respect for the teacher. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up things to you. And then what's going to happen is you may have questions. But there's also adab of questions. So, أَلَّا يَسْتَحْيِي مِنْ سُؤَالِ مَا أَشْكَلَ عَلَيْهِ. A person, the first adab of question is you should not be shy to ask something that you don't know. Don't be shy. Imam Mujahid, rahmatullah, he says, لا يتعلم العلم مستحٍ ولا مستكبر. 2 people can never learn knowledge. One, a person who's arrogant, because they'll be too arrogant to sit in anyone's lectures. They will never be able to sit with somebody, listen to them. They won't be able to do it. That's why talibul ilm, the first quality they have to have is humility, because you have to be able to sit and take notes and listen to someone who is far younger than you, right? Who's maybe the people, scholars are becoming, some of you are old enough to be our parents. But this is the beauty of knowledge, that we listen from everyone, because al-hikmatu dalatul mu'min, because ilm is the lost commodity of a believer. You take it from wherever you get it. Whoever's helping you with it, you take it from that person. So the first person who cannot ever attain knowledge is the one who's arrogant. And the second one is the one who's shy. Shy. If you didn't know something, you're too shy to ask. That person cannot attain knowledge either, because as you're sitting and you're paying attention and you have adab, Allah opens up things to you. You're learning things, and now you have questions. And that's why Abdullah ibn Abbas who said, when he summarized how he became such a great scholar, he said 2 things. بِلِسَانٍ سُؤُولٍ وَقَلْبٍ عُقُولٍ. That's it. These 2 things I had. Because of that, Allah kept on giving me more knowledge. A tongue that asked good questions, relevant questions. We're going to go into that good questions right now in a second. Not like I mentioned, what question I mentioned yesterday? What's the eye color of Dajjal? Okay? That's not a relevant question. بِلِسَانٍ سُؤُولٍ, a tongue that asks good questions. وَقَلْبٍ عُقُولٍ, in a heart that's present. There. So these 2 things I had. Because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept on giving me knowledge. The Prophet ﷺ says, Hazrat Aisha says about the Ansar, the women of Ansar, he says, رحم الله نساء الأنصار لم يكن الحياء يمنعهن أن يتفقهن في الدين. May Allah have mercy on the women of Ansar. Shyness did not stop them from asking questions about deen. So we should ask questions. What type of questions and when we should ask these questions? First of all, every teacher has different adab. Some teachers appreciate asking questions at the end of class. And I think that's the general rule. That's the general, unless they ask you, the general rule is ask at the end of class. Unless they tell you you can ask while I'm speaking. Sometimes you're speaking, and before like the speaker even finishes, you already have your hands up for a question. That's disturbing. You're like a reporter now. The second thing is, when you're asking a question and the scholar says something that maybe you heard something different on that topic from another scholar, okay? Don't ask the question and say, Sheikh Abdul Rahman, well, Dr. Haifa said that was haram. Don't mention her name. Don't make scholars like a tennis ball, like you play with them, their names. This scholar said that scholar said that. No, ask the question. If you really want to know the answer, just say, what do you think about this? The third thing is, ask the question with the intent to act upon it, with the intent to correct what you're thinking. Don't ask the question to challenge the teacher. Don't do that. Let me challenge the teacher. Don't do that. Because if you challenge the teacher, you're not going to be able to benefit from that teacher. And that's the end of my 4 etiquettes. There's other things about questions, but I'll leave that for you. Allama Ibn Jama'a rahmatullah, he says, إنما أمر السؤال من قصد به علم ما جهل ونهى عنه عن قصد به إن عات ما سمع. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages asking questions for the one who intends to rid some type of ignorance, not the one who wants to just challenge and compete with the teacher. I heard this and that. Don't do that. May Allah make it easy for us to act upon whatever was said, bring it to our lives. Remember, through etiquettes, we will learn more. We will elevate in our ranks in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I said something that was offensive, forgive me. Even Siri was offended. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.